welcome to another episode of A Fat Perspective, the podcast where we talk about bodies and how to liberate our bodies and find just agency for ourselves. And with me, I have such a wonderful human being, Christina Casey. I met her this year, and I've just ever since I met her, I fell in love with her. So I would love for her to introduce herself. So hi.
I'm Christina Casey. I am a registered nurse and I specialize in hospice and end-of-life care. And I am also a WIM HOF method instructor, which is how we met, which is a method of breathwork and ice baths and mental focus. And I'm also a women's wellness coach. We're a company, Breath, Body, and Soul, where I help women connect with their breath and their bodies and their souls through multiple modalities. And then I also do retreats in France where we got to spend some time together this year.
It was so lovely. So if people want to find more of you, how should they find you?
My website should be up soon. I've been saying that for a while, but it's ChristinaCasey.com or on Instagram at Breath, Body, and Soul.
Yeah, and I'll put all that in the show notes. So if people want to reach out to you and connect and do more work, they could do so because it's fabulous.
I love that. Great. Thank you.
Yeah. Not everyone's familiar with A, what breathwork is, and B, what Wim Hof is. So do you mind giving us a little background for those of us who are ignorant?
Sure. So there's many, many different styles of breathwork. In fact, one of the limbs, there's 8 limbs of yoga, and one of the limbs of yoga is pranayama, which is just controlling the breath. So breath work is doing a specific breath pattern in a very specific way to elicit a response. So there's different breath patterns and different styles of breath work that help with anxiety or help with stress management, or breath work styles to calm your nervous system, or breath work styles to increase your energy. So by controlling our breath in a specific pattern, in a specific way, we can have physiological effects and benefits. And the Wim Hof method it combines breath work with cold immersion and mental focus. And the style of breath work we do with the Wim Hof method is based on an ancient style of breath work called Tumo breath. So the Wim Hof style of breath work is we do 30 big breaths. We do a big breath in, a relaxed breath out. We do that 30 times. And then on the 30th breath, we exhale completely or almost completely. We let all of our air out to a natural, comfortable state. And then we hold for as long as we can. And then we take a big breath in and hold for 15 seconds. And we do that in multiple rounds.
I'm remembering somatically and the felt sense of what it felt like. And I'm laughing because it's such a wild experience.
Yeah, it seems so easy. And for someone that's never experienced it, you're like, why is everyone talking about this? But I was first introduced to the Wim Hof style of breath work through a yoga teacher training program. And I was very lucky that my yoga mentor had studied Wim Hof breath work. And we tried all different types of pranayama breath work. But that first round of the Wim Hof breathwork I connected so deeply with it. It felt like the first time I was really fully introduced to myself. It felt like the first time I really felt my soul, that seer of your thoughts and your emotions, that your true essence. That was the first time I felt fully present in my body, was within one round. And went home and was like, what is this? I love this. This is what I've been looking for. I did a deep dive on the Wim Hof method specifically. And because I have 2 sides to my brain, I have this nurse side that only believes in evidence-based practices and peer-reviewed blind studies.
Which I'm going to interrupt you and say that was when you said that. So for people who don't know, I attended one of Christina's workshops in Los Angeles. And when she said that, I was like, yes, thank you. Because in these breath work, I feel like a lot of people do not have that background.
Yeah.
And that makes it less credible, even though the benefits are the same. So when you said that, I was like, yes, thank you.
Yeah. Well, so the other side of my brain is this hippie side that puts her crystals out for the full moon. And so my hippie side was sold because I felt that breath. I felt the power of that breath work in my body. And then when I went home, my nurse side did a deep dive. And now we know there's data and studies that support that breath work has physiological benefits. It's not just woo-woo hippie shit. Like, we know for sure there's positive benefits from doing something so simple as controlling your breath, which
Right.
is, and it's free. It's accessible anytime. Everybody, every body, every shape, every size. Unless you're on a ventilator, you can control your own breath. And even on a ventilator, because I used to be a nurse for event-dependent quadriplegics, so you can even control ventilator settings if you really wanted to do breath work. So this is a practice for everybody.
Yeah.
Every person can do it.
I love that it's for every single human who can take
Right.
a breath. So I'm gonna like backtrack a little bit because I feel like you gave
Yeah.
us a lot of awesome juice. Like just to even go back, 'cause I do want to hear more about the first
Uh-huh.
time, like what happened to you, like why you were like, oh my gosh, like because I
Uh-huh.
feel like there's like that powerful story there about how you felt yourself, like before and
Right.
after. I'd love to hear more about that. And then the other thing is like I feel like a lot of us have like not a good sense of who we are in our bodies, or we don't feel safe
Right.
in our bodies, or we've been told by the whole wide world like, okay, your body needs to be like thin, you need
Hmm.
to be tall, you need all these things.
Right.
And if I'm struggling with all of that, how can
Hmm.
breathwork help me?
Okay. Yeah. So that in that time of that first round of the Wim Hof breath work was a very transformative time in my life. I got married and had children very, very young. And I had just left a 20-year marriage. My oldest son was getting ready to leave for college. And I realized that, like, oh, I'm going to, the other two were going to follow quickly after him. I've been a hospice nurse, and then that year I took a position as an administrator. And when you tell people you're a hospice nurse, you get this like label of good person. And then when you tell someone you're like an administrator, like you don't get that label anymore. And so every label that I had put on myself of wife, mother, hospice nurse, all of those labels were being taken away from me.
Mm,
And then I was just stuck with myself. And I was having a really hard time at the end of yoga in Shavasana, where
mm,
you just lay still. And I thought at this point, I was 39 years old at this point, and I was like, why at almost 40 years old is the most difficult part of my day just being with myself? Like, what
mm,
is it? And so I went on this quest at this time to like figure that out. What was missing for me to have this connection with myself?
mhm,
And who am I without these labels? And for some reason, that breath work was exactly the answer to my question. It was like, oh, I have all that power inside of me. Everything that I need is already inside of me, and the breath is a tool to help get you back into that feeling of
mm.
center, especially when we have so much distraction around us all the time.
Because what I hear you say was that
Mm.
what breathwork does for you, and maybe for a lot of the people you
Mhm.
coach or teach, is that
Mm.
it gives people a sense of like, I am the most capable for me.
Mhm.
Like I have the power. Like it returns us to like
Mhm.
our center.
Right. We're the captains of this ship. There's
Mhm.
there's no one else that's in charge. I like to call it the meat suit because we're a soul inside this meat suit that can be really fun, but can also be really painful at times
Yes.
too. And so much of our focus can go onto this meat suit versus the beautiful light that's within us. And the
Mhm.
breath is this wonderful tool to help us remember of who we really are, right?
I
Yeah.
really, really love that because this,
Mhm.
for people listening, like I went back to school this past semester to study clinical
Ooh,
psychology.
that's
Yay!
exciting.
And in clinical psychology, they talk a lot, in one of the classes, they talk a lot about anti-oppressive therapeutic practices and
Hmm.
like, what ways of therapy can help people out of like
Hmm.
their felt sense of marginalization and oppression. And, I was looking at it through like, okay, like all of us are oppressed because of our body
Hmm.
size, shape, ability, and all these things. And one of the very powerful things they said was if we can have like ownership of our felt sense
Hmm.
and really be here and be okay, then that's when we start to take our power back, because we're no
Right.
longer relying on other
Mhm.
people or outside sources to tell us if we're okay or not. We start to develop the tools to feel our way through ourselves and go, okay, this is my
Mhm.
sensation, and therefore I'm okay because this is
Right.
mine.
And
So,
then on like a physiological level,
mhm,
what breath work is really doing and what we really need to teach people, and especially children coming out, and I think we're doing a much better job teaching kids,
mhm,
it's nervous system regulation.
mhm,
We need
mhm.
to self-regulate our nervous system. And so
Yeah,
many of us, we all have our vices of food and sex and alcohol and drugs or shopping or Instagram. Like we all have our vices. And it's like,
mhm,
what we're doing with those vices is we're trying to calm our nervous system. And those of us who grew up in dysregulated households too, that like I wasn't taught, I lived in constant chaos growing up. And so as an adult, I only knew nervous system dysregulation.
Can I
And
pause?
sure.
And just because, like, I don't think everyone who's listening may know what nervous system
Okay.
regulation is, could you just give us a little bit of background
Sure.
so that, because, like, I know, but I'm assuming some people might
Mhm.
not. So, yeah.
Uh, okay. So our nervous system is broken up into many different areas of how you
Mhm.
can break it up,
Yeah.
autonomic. But the two main areas that I like to teach are the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. Your parasympathetic nervous system is your rest and digest. That's when your nervous system is calm. That's when you're taking a nap. That's when everything your
Mhm.
digestion works, right? Like when you're relaxed, you're in your parasympathetic nervous system. Now, when a tiger comes to chase you, that's when you're in your sympathetic nervous system. And all these other adaptations start to happen so that you can have focus and so that you can be alert and that you can
Right.
run fast. And so, what has happened is that our society has evolved faster than our biology. And so, we have constant stimulation. We have
Yeah.
this constant input, this constant stimulation that our nervous system doesn't know how to regulate and know how
Mhm.
to respond to. If you're surrounded or being raised by people that don't know how to regulate their nervous systems, or if you're married to someone that doesn't know how to regulate theirs, then that can make you feel nervous and trigger anxiety. So breath work is this tool to teach you how to regulate your own nervous system, meaning teaching you how do you shift from sympathetic to parasympathetic. And an example is, when you're sitting in traffic and you're safe, right? You've had enough food that day. You have your seatbelt on. You know you're driving to shelter. Everything is thermoregulated. You're not too hot. You're not too cold. There's not a tiger coming after you,
Yeah.
but your heart starts racing. You can feel the clamminess. You can get like a stomach ache. You start
Mhm.
having that's sympathetic nervous system responses because of the stressor of traffic. Like traffic is an inconvenience. It's
Yes.
not it's not a tiger attacking you, but in our modern world, we have a difficult time learning how to regulate that.
Yes.
So breath work is an instant tool of like, oh, I can see that I'm starting to have these physical response to stress. How can I tap back into that parasympathetic nervous system? Which is it's so simple and so easy, and why I'm so passionate about teaching people about it because it does change your life.
Mm. And the one thing that when you were describing this, and
Mhm,
this is something you told me
mhm,
in when we were together in France, but
mhm,
it came up in conversation is why this is so powerful is because a lot of us rely on our brains
mhm.
to try to figure things out. So if I'm
Right.
stressed out, I'm going to try to think my way through the problem, and
Mhm.
sometimes our brain is where the problem is.
Right.
It's and I love that, like, when you were talking about breath work, it's like, no, let's help the body. So once the
Mhm.
body's okay, then the brain can then actually come and solve the problem. So that was something that you said
Right.
that like, blew my mind, you
I think
know?
all of us have been in that case where there has been something that stressed us out. We worked it out, in our brilliant minds. We solved the problem, but then there's still this like feeling in our bodies, and
Yeah.
especially women too. I know men have it also, but
Mhm.
women, we're so somatic in our bodies
Yeah.
that we need to have a tool how to move that energy out of us.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So if you
Mhm.
are able to share, like, what are some, like, for some people, like, what
Mhm.
have you witnessed what breathwork has done for
Mhm.
people, and I'm especially curious about people's relationship with their bodies.
So we do know from science, we do know a couple things is that during breath work, especially the Wim Hof style of breath work, um, that it changes the pH in our blood. And
Hmm.
so by changing the pH in our blood, it actually releases these anti-inflammatory proteins. And
Mm.
so having high levels of inflammation in our body is the root cause of autoimmune diseases. It's also
Mhm.
the root cause of pain. So we know that with the Wim Hof style breathwork specifically, that we can help with autoimmune diseases. We can help with pain. It changes the way our pain receptors respond to pain
Mhm.
stimulus. There's a lot of anecdotal stories I can tell too. I had one friend that he was in a car accident and was having severe chronic pain in his leg, and his pain management doctor told him the next step for managing his pain was to amputate his leg. And he started the Wim Hof breath work and his off pain meds and
Wow.
kept his leg, which is amazing. Um, it can also help with hormone regulation because if we have stress levels of or high levels of cortisol, that affects all of our other hormones. And so,
Mhm.
like for a feminine standpoint, you have PCOS
Yes.
or perimenopausal, like
Mhm.
I am. Where our hormones are shifting all around. These high cortisol levels are going to affect everything. So if we have a tool that can manage that and bring that down, um, we also know that during this breath work, we release endocannabinoids and
Mhm.
endoopiates, which cannabinoids is what's found in marijuana. Opioids is what's found in pain medications.
Yeah.
So after doing the breath work, which I'm sure you've experienced, sometimes you get this really beautiful euphoric feeling. We call
Mhm.
it getting high on your own supply. It's this
I love that.
I
Getting high.
didn't make that up. But it is good. I have a T-shirt.
It's
Um,
great.
but you can have this like feeling
Mhm.
of euphoria after the breath work, and an extreme, like if you're really doing some deep, deep breath work,
Yeah.
we think possibly there's this release of DMT, which is called, some people call it the God molecule or spirit molecule, and it's found in, it's a hallucinogen.
Okay,
Um,
because I wanted to
go ahead.
ask you about that because when I did breath work with you in
Uh-huh.
France, I had a vision afterwards, and it felt
Hmm.
like I was tripping on a hallucinogen.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I saw my dead mother, and I, like, had an interaction with my dead mother, and it shifted our relationship
It's
after breath work,
beautiful.
and I was like,
Yeah.
"Am I?" Like
No, we know that it's very common. The highest I've been, I was in Poland with WIM, and we did this really deep session. There were 100 of us in a room, and we were doing this deep, deep breathwork session. And I had a full body orgasm, and then the divine feminine came to me and gave me her blessing to help women, and then the sun felt like it levitated my body and turned me to the sun and then told me I was a goddess of the sun. And it was the highest I've actually ever been in my
Right,
entire life through breath work.
like, you get high, like, yes, and, like, and not with you, with another practitioner, like, I met my inner child in the
Right.
woods, and then I had, like, basically a goddess come and tell me, "Here's your life flame, take care of it."
I know people who haven't done it yet are like, these bitches are crazy. We are not. Listen, you can't tell
I
me I'm not a goddess of the sun, right? I had the conversation.
But what I love about you
Uh-huh.
specifically is that when you talk about it, it's grounded not just in anecdotal evidence.
Right.
That's the
And you know
thing.
what? And not every time you do breath work, are you going to get to see your inner child or,
Yeah.
see my daily breath work practice is very simple and it's very easy. And they've also found recently in studies too but there's a study that came out that said if you have 15 minutes a day, that there's actually better effects for your brain to do breath work than to do just meditation on its own.
And
And
are all breath work created equal in their ability, where they're, if like, the because when you say breath work, it's like, which breath
yeah.
work is it?
There's so many different styles.
there's
You know,
like
there's some, so, you know, my breath work when I'm specifically like a little stressed out, or I can feel my sympathetic nervous system, or like I just don't have a lot of time. I call it the sniff breath, but it's just really easy of just 2 inhales in through your nose and then a long exhale through your mouth. So
okay.
works to calm you down. There's other breath works, like our beautiful friend Bria, who's also my Wim Hof partner. She teaches the pranayama 2-stage breath. And that is the purpose of that breath work, which is you go into a room that is dark, you are protected, you have pillows. This isn't just a simple breath work practice that you can do during the day, right? This is an intentional session that is meant to have emotional release. Because with breath work can come emotional releases.
Yes. The first time I attended your workshop, we were in a room in was it Beverly Hills? I don't remember.
Venice, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. And then we were in a room of 7 or 8 people, and then some people were crying after. And then their bodies froze up. It was like people's bodies were doing things against their conscious will, which was fantastic.
Yeah. Well, it also, you know, I love a lot of times in our public workshops, we'll have yogis and we'll have CrossFitters. We have people that come to the Wim Hof method for many different reasons. A lot of it is for like endurance and fitness. And then the yogis, of course, are like coming for emotional release. And it's always the CrossFitters that end up crying in the corner, which I love. It's like they've come to like help their fitness, and then they end up healing some sort of trauma through breath work.
So the one thing that, okay. So one of the things that attracted me to you and Brea was because you're both women, and I find it unusual, especially in the Wim Hof world, for women to be like participating and an instructor. Because when I look on the website, the instructors are mostly male. And it feels like a very masculine practice. Like, am I off base here? Like,
no, not at all. It's and to be honest, it's a majority of white men that are drawn to the Wim Hof practice. You know, Bria and I, you know, Bria's a woman of color. I come from a mixed ethnic background, and I was like, when I'm the brownest face on the screen, there's a problem there. So we have these big instructor meetings where we get together with instructors from all over the world, and it is mostly men. And there are more women coming into it. I think specifically with the Wim Hof method, it is so masculine driven because there's also ice baths and cold training attached to that. And that women usually tend to fear the cold. I know I did. The only reason why I took an ice bath was because I connected so much with the breath work. I decided like, well, okay, if this is the method, let me see what the whole thing is all about. And the breathwork practice can be really male dominated. You know, it is work. Breathwork can be aggressive. It's not always this really soft sort of feel good thing. It's called breathwork for a reason.
Oh, this was like, wow, there are 2 women who've carved like a space for themselves in this.
Yeah. Oh no,
I just wanted to make that clear.
Thinking.
We're not pooping on men.
No, we're not at all. There's some amazing practitioners. That being said, there's the energy that I bring into this world is kind of a strong maternal energy. Like I'm strong. I'm physically a strong person. I have a strong personality, but I'm also really loving and soft and safe. And I think for something like breath work, that is the energy that a lot of people need, is because it is a heart opening practice. And so you need to feel safe, and then also know that you're going to be nurtured and loved. And that's what why I'm so drawn to teaching it to people. It's because I can see how much we really need this in this world. We think of this feminine energy as kind of light and flowy, but also no, it's like this mama bear energy too. And it's when you get to experience that and have that sort of safe place to really tap into yourself, it's life-changing.
I love this, that you brought up safety, because it almost feels like breath work gives us access to generate our safety. But for some of us new to this work, it's like having someone create a space of safety will also help us access that. And it seems like that's something you do really well.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Well, because a lot of times in breath work, what can happen is emotions that we've been holding deep down inside
Mhm.
come up. We can spend our entire life not wanting to face those emotions, our entire life not wanting to deal with that sort of
Mhm.
feeling and swallowing that pill. And now in a room full of other people, you can't fight that feeling. um but like we say in our classes and with my work, if that feeling comes up in breath work, if you're having a big emotion, that means that's an emotion you've been carrying around with you, and it's
Mhm.
either going to come up and you process it now, or it's going to sit and eat you away. So we might as well let it out now. And we all have it.
Yes.
Bria and I tell people in our workshops, like, we have seen it all. We've guide people through it all, but more importantly, Bria and I have both felt it all. We have been there. We have laughed uncontrollably. We have sobbed uncontrollably. We've felt pain that I didn't know that I had during breath work.
Yeah.
I felt emotions that I thought that I had gotten over, and it's like, oh, I'm not. Here they are again. Okay, now we may have scared a lot of people.
No, some breath work is lovely. Sometimes breath work is like a warm hug. It's like I'm
Uh-huh.
sitting on a beach and it's just this lovely
Right.
sensation. And sometimes,
Right.
sometimes it's like, uh-oh, like I could freeze up and sob for
Hmm.
because of those are the things that are trapped in my body that need to.
Hmm.
And then the other thing I am curious about, I would almost encourage people if big things keep coming out, and you can feel free to agree or
Hmm.
disagree with me. I'm almost like maybe going to therapy to help process this would
Hmm.
be helpful, because it almost seems like a key point of breath work is like, yes, you have the breath work, but then like it's almost like the conversation afterwards, where the
Right.
integration is really important because
Hmm.
we need to make sense of what happened, right?
Right. Sometimes it's wonderful to keep, and maybe we should also describe that like, breathwork sessions can be very different. Like, so I do usually an afternoon breathwork session
Mhm.
because I drive a lot for work as a hospice nurse, and I tend to have an energy slump. So I do just 3 rounds I pull over, find a little piece of grass, and I do like 3 quick rounds. So 3 quick rounds of the Wim Hof method, you're not going to start talking to the sun, right? Like
Okay.
that's that's not going to happen. um, the bigger emotional releases that you and I are talking and sharing
Yeah.
about, these are very intentional. We're in a room, we're being guided, we have the space to do it. It's not often that just like a couple rounds, all of a sudden you're going to start
Yeah.
seeing colors, and yeah. But in those bigger breathwork sessions too, it is really great to have a journal, or before you, if you know you're going to your therapist, or if you know you're going someplace, doing some breath work beforehand to also align yourself, that feeling of your soul back into your heart, and have a little bit more proprioception, a feeling of that, than being constantly in our meat suits and external. But I think breath work and therapy, is going to be the future of breath work. It's going to be integrated more in the medical field with pain management.
Mhm.
There's also a lot with inflammation, but there's also a lot with red blood cells and white blood cells. We found that when you hold your breath for a long time, there's something
Mhm.
called hormesis, which is a response to a stressor. And so we found that when you hold your breath for a long time, you actually release more of this protein called EPO, which transports oxygen to your muscles and to your organs. It's what Lance Armstrong doped with, was EPO. And now we found that we can naturally stimulate endogenous EPO through breath work. So breath work I think, is going to be part of therapy. I wouldn't be surprised if therapists now do a little breath work before they start their sessions.
Well,
Um,
actually, my
yeah,
therapist does that. Like I go to
great.
and she will say, "Okay,
Hmm.
before we start,
Hmm.
what can you do to be in this room?"
Hmm.
So, for me, breath work is how
Hmm.
I access. So, yes, it's
Beautiful.
happening. It's happening.
Yeah, it's happening. I think I have a friend in the Bay Area that works for a pain management clinic.
Mhm.
So, pain management doctors are realizing that medication alone isn't always working. So, what's a different modality? cancer treatments. We know that with doing breath work, that increase your white blood cell count. And there's a lot of people that are in cancer treatment that have to pause their chemotherapy because their white blood cell count is too low. So if we can do breath work to keep that white blood cell count up higher, I think it's going to be part of chemotherapy. It already is mainstream for sports. Like people are already doing breath work before they work out because it helps with performance.
I know we just touched on it. We didn't talk about it at all. Another component of Wim Hof is the coldness.
Yeah, that's a whole other lecture.
I mean, is it worth mentioning it a little bit? Because it is like, what is it, 50% of it, or I don't even know. It's like it's a huge.
So component. Right, and it is part of the Wim Hof method is breath work, cold immersion, and this mindset, this mental focus sort of thing. But that we could do a whole nother podcast on the benefits of cold exposure and ice bath, and also really feeling your body too and being empowered in your body. Ice bath is one of the best things that you can do for it. And a lot women are usually more afraid of taking ice baths. I know I was, and that's part of it is because our hormone levels of estrogen make us more sensitive to cold. But it's my experience that in general, women tend to do better in the ice than men.
When I went to a workshop, I've never in my life wanted to, or had any interest in getting into a tub of ice. Don't care. Seems really painful. It seems awful, right? And I remember you telling us that there is a point where we surrender. Like where it gets so painful, and then we just like let go because we see clearly. And that was one of the most profound moments of being there with you. Was just like I sat there and I'm like, this is super painful. Ow. And then I started laughing because I was like, oh, it's just pain.
Right. The two things we're really guaranteed in this human experience is that we're going to feel pain again. We're going to feel pain emotionally and physically. I mean, and I work with people every day at the end of life that their families and them are going through their most emotional, painful moments and physical, painful moments. We know that this is guaranteed, this emotional and physical pain. The only thing we have control over is how we are going to respond. So getting in a tub of ice is a practice of finding comfort within discomfort. It's practicing how you're going to respond to pain. And I mean, I'm sure you can explain, like, since I now have this practice of taking ice baths on a regular basis, I feel so much more secure and safe in my life. Just knowing that, listen, I can do really hard things. I know that's like a tagline for a lot of people, but no, like I can sit in a tub of ice and control my nervous system and regulate myself. I've climbed snowy mountains and pull into nothing but shorts and a sports bra. I'm heading to Iceland on Sunday to do an adventure with some friends. It's like I know that I am capable of doing these difficult things because I practice finding comfort within discomfort.
I love the idea, like it's like the surrender and the acceptance that pain is part of life. And I think for me, I can talk about myself. Like I am pain avoidant. That is why. That is why one of my main survival strategies was binging. I wanted to eat so I don't feel. So then this idea of like having a practice where through breath work, feeling safe in my body, feeling safe in my sensations, feeling that I can handle it, and then slowly practicing being with pain, like safe pain. Like when we're practicing,
right, I'm in control. Right, like you get to pick when you get out of the ice. This is a controlled environment. So, we do a different style of breath work when we get into the ice. We don't do the breath work that I described earlier. We never do that in water because you always have the potential of passing out. So you don't want to do that in water. But the breath work we do when we do get into the ice is this long exhale, this long exhale. And so the first time, and it helps us get back into our bodies, back into control. And when I took the first ice bath that I ever did, when I got in, I naturally started to do that breath. And also I went into the place of my brain of like, that's where I went when I had natural childbirth. It was like, oh, I instinctively knew where to go. Like, okay, I have been in pain before. I know how to handle this. Like, I am capable of doing this.
What a beautiful practice. But like with the
Hmm.
breath work and just giving ourselves like empowerment to be like ourselves in our lives. This is what this sounds
Hmm.
like.
And again, going back to why breath work is so powerful, it's before I was a hospice nurse, I also did maternal child health. So it's like we signify the beginning of life by
Mhm.
breath, and then we signify the end of life by our last breath. And then we have this whole life in between where we like basically totally forget about it.
Mm.
And the breath is our light force. Breath is what connects us to this, like this energetic, and it's free and it's accessible, and it's there for you anytime you want it, and it's so powerful when we use it to help heal ourselves.
I love that you drew the analogy to life and death because for me,
Mhm.
whenever I practice Wim Hof breathing, and I think I
Mhm.
might have mentioned this to you before, like when I'm doing the breath holds, I feel like I'm dying.
Because there is this point where there is no breath, but there is life. There's the stillness, and when you sit still and hold your breath, and you realize how important breath is, and like how that you don't even pay attention to it, and but then when it's not there, you're like, oh, I really like that. I want to keep it. Um, and which is fascinating is at the end of life, there is a very specific breath pattern that happens naturally to us,
Oh,
physiologically as mammals. The medical term is called chain stoking. Some people call it the death rattle. But there's this change in breathing as people go through the process of dying. And it's not that different than the Wim Hof style of breath work. And which is fascinating, right? People will start doing like shallow breaths, and then all of a sudden they'll take one big breath in, and then they'll stop breathing for a while. It's called apnea, and they'll stop breathing for a little while, and then all of a sudden they'll take another big breath in. I was like, oh, this is similar to the Wim Hof style breath work. And we think that the end of life is actually this euphoric feeling. And so we know how good it feels to do the Wim
mhm.
Hof style of breath work. But if you look at someone doing it, you're like, wow, that doesn't look comfortable,
No.
but it feels good.
Mhm. It's wild that it's the
Mhm.
same pattern that happens when people,
Yeah, very similar.
and I am so grateful that you are my introduction to Wim Hof. Like really and truly.
Oh,
I mean, you made the breath work so precious
mm.
and it was such a precious, personalized, and transformative experience, and yet
Oh.
accessible.
Yeah,
It wasn't this
right.
mystical thing that, like, because I sometimes feel like when people teach these things, like this mystical thing, you'll never achieve it. You're like, you can do it anytime.
Right. Yeah. Like you don't need me here. Like you could do it. Actually, you know what we should add in the link too is
Yes.
our beautiful Bria has a guided breath work on YouTube, a video where she guides people through breath work.
Yes. I
So
will
we
put
could,
that in the show notes so people
yeah.
can practice. But there is, I will say, like myself, the reason why I'm so drawn to community in this is
Hmm.
because I think, and you have more experience with this, because you like helped thousands of people through this.
I have.
Yeah,
Yeah, I've helped
thousands.
thousands in the last few
Thousands.
years. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So like there is something that's different when we do it en masse than when we do it by ourselves.
Oh, absolutely. There's a collective energy. There's doing your individual breath work is still beautiful, but
Mhm.
and a great practice. But if you have the opportunity to do group breath work, absolutely take it. It's wonderful. That experience of collectively being with other
Mhm.
people is really powerful.
And it connects us in a way that simple conversation can't. When I'm in a
Hmm.
group with people in
Hmm.
breathwork afterwards, I look at everybody, I'm like, I know you differently, even though we haven't really spoken.
Right. Like I love you. Like you have this feeling of wanting to hug someone after breath work.
Yeah, so
Right?
yes, it's such a beautiful thing. And again,
Mhm.
just like thank you for doing this work and thank you for
Oh,
making it doable. And there's
right.
actual evidence that shows why it's helpful, not just like by
Hmm.
anecdote or felt sense. So
Right,
Yeah.
right. And you know, it's really an extension of WIM's dedication to the world. WIM, who started the Wim Hof method, he was the one, you know, like there's all these gurus and there's all these practices, but they're up in the mountains and like the people need it. People need it. Like come down from the mountain and teach the people the tools that they need. And you know, I've said this before that I've spent the last 20 years helping people die comfortable, die with dignity, die surrounded in love. And it's like now I have this passion. I want people to live that way. I want people
Mm,
to live in comfort, live surrounded in love, live with dignity. You know, we shouldn't just make that a priority at the end of life. That is something that we should be carrying through all of our days.
yes. And I think a great beginning to that is by feeling safe in our bodies and finding
Hmm.
who we are and
Right.
being grounded in that. Like we don't need somebody else to make us feel okay. We don't need like
Right.
we have it within us. And the breath work that you facilitate and you teach and then and other schools too are very
Mhm.
powerful methods to get us to that point of I'm good,
Right.
I'm well.
It's a tool in the toolbox, and we all need as much help as we can get, right? It's so simple and it's there for us.
So yeah. Well, Tina, thank you so much. So much
You
for coming
thank
on
you.
today.
Thank you.